Good afternoon, everyone. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining on time. Enjoy conference call bingo card while you wait. Right, everyone, thanks for joining. We'll give it a couple of more minutes to give people time to settle in over their lunch hour and join. We appreciate your time this afternoon and hope you enjoy the presentation. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, Laurie, we can go ahead and get started.
Great.
Excellent. Well, everyone, thanks so much for making time in your afternoon to join our webinar this afternoon. I'm Justin Cullifer with APG Emerging Technology, joined by Laurie Gray from RGP. And we're excited to spend some time with you this afternoon over your lunch break to talk about ensuring you and your team remain productive during this interesting time where so many of us are working virtually. This afternoon, we're going to share a lot of information, a lot of personal stories. Laurie and I have worked in just about every environment imaginable, from office to cubicle to copy room, and that includes virtual working as well. So we hope that some of our ideas and concepts prove useful for you. Laurie, anything to add before we get started?
No, I think the only question or request that I'd make of the audience is we'd love for this to be interactive. And so we will be opening the lines at the end for questions, comments, and discussion. But if you have questions or comments in the meantime, go ahead and post them in the webinar chat. I've got it open. Justin's got it open. We'll be monitoring there. So hopefully, if something pops up and you've got a question, send it through that way and we'll be able to address it on the fly.
Absolutely. And we're also recording today's session, and we're happy to share that link with anyone who would like a copy of it. All right, so our agenda for this presentation is here. We're going to begin by sharing some stats and figures, some of the things you probably already know because we're all in this together. And we're not your source for 24-hour news, so bear with us. We'll share some of the information we know as of today. Then we'll talk about the importance of productivity, especially in this virtual working environment. And then get quickly into tips for productive teaming. And lastly, as Laurie mentioned, we'll do Q&A and answer any of your questions that you submit through the chat. All right, so it's an interesting world out there today. This webinar is taking place during the coronavirus situation. However, the tips and suggestions that we make today are really applicable to virtual working in general. So many of us have teammates that are working from home or even working overseas. And I think that the ideas and concepts that we share today will be applicable to those situations too. But certainly, the spotlight is on the coronavirus today, and what we're seeing are, of course, sports events canceled or postponed. Schools are closed. Many of you may have little ones running around outside of your home office right now. Primary elections postponed, and the list goes on. And you notice that the very last item, toilet paper, is even more scarce than events right now. So one of the main things that I think is important when you're working from home, and certainly in any crisis situation, is to maintain some sense of humor about it. We try to find a little glimmer of light and a little glimmer of hope in any down situation. And Laurie, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've been saying to my teams recently is, hey, give yourself some grace, right? At RGP, we had an email come out from our president and COO who said, hey, look, this is our opportunity, paraphrasing heavily, but this is our opportunity to get to know your extended family a little bit more, because we're fully expecting right now, given the situation that we're in, that we're going to get to meet your children, possibly your spouses, your pets. That's okay, right? We're working in really strange times right now, but I think, the core message of the articles, for example, that I did publish recently, really was focusing on, with some forethought and some intention, you can remain as productive as you are at the office, right? It's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to mean a little bit of difference in the way that you're thinking about things and doing things, but it's very, very possible.
Exactly. So why promoting productivity is important? Certainly everyone knows their job, your role, your responsibility, but having an eye and keeping an eye on just how productive you are and how productive your teams are is even more important when you don't have that benefit of walking down the hallway and knocking on someone's office door. So many of us have only periodically worked remotely. Some people work remote full-time, and that's just part of the conditions of their job. Others have only done so when there's been a need to stay home and meet the plumber, or if there's been a snow day. So there's a sizable portion of our population who are not good at working remote, or not as proficient as they are about to be working remotely. Many of us have not had to virtually work as a team for an extended period of time. It's one thing if I need to stay home and meet the plumber. It's an entirely different thing if the entire 5, 10, 15 person team needs to stay home and also meet the plumber, right? Those situations just haven't happened until recently. And it's critically important. We're seeing this certainly in the behavior of the stock market. We're seeing this in the news. It's important that the business must continue producing, adding value, and generating revenue. I would say there's even a heightened sense of that right now, to make sure that you're delivering for your clients, for your customers, and for each other, and that your business still maintains its positive reputation right now.
Exactly. And I think, Justin, there's an opportunity for us all too. As I was talking with friends and colleagues, I am a work from home employee. This has been my role. The team that I work with is actually distributed between Nashville and London, and kind of points in between. The people have expressed interest and a desire to be able to work from home. And now that they're faced with that opportunity, I think it's maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I think it bears mentioning that I would suspect that organizations are also looking at this as a bit of a test, right? How viable is this in order to shift their workforce to a virtual environment? Does it work? And so again, to go back to one of my key points, do this with intention. Do this with forethought and intention. Your point, Justin, about continuing to focus on the revenue and the value production that you are providing, your teams are providing, absolutely critical right now. but also bear in mind, this may help us begin to change the conversation with organizations and across organizations about their concepts of a virtual workforce and where does it work and how does it work. And in some cases, we're being forced into it. Great, we're going to make the best of it. But in other cases, I suspect that we may actually find some new business models and some opportunities that actually are really going to work well for us in the future. But we've got to do it right now.
That's exactly it. So as we start getting into some of our tips and suggestions, we wanted to begin with planning and logistics. A little bit of planning can go a long way in general, and especially when working virtually from home or from a remote location. So our first idea and concept here is planning ahead. And this means scheduling meetings and ensuring the invitation includes a clear agenda and connection details. As I mentioned earlier, it's easy when you're in an office environment to just pop by someone's cubicle or office and ask, even huddle as a team in an impromptu. It's a little more difficult when everyone is not co-located. So taking advantage of scheduling meetings ahead of time, we'll talk more about agendas in just a moment, but we want to make sure that this helps you with preventing some of those unanticipated situations, right? There are going to be times when, certainly if you have little ones at home now, you need to structure your day a little bit more. You need to carve out these times and plan times to work with your colleagues and also spend time with your little ones as well to make sure they have what they need. So this is a key aspect of working virtually successfully, is planning ahead and getting meetings scheduled ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, scenarios to build off of what you're saying, Justin, about having children at home. I think, as I've looked around our organization this week, the parents are really the ones that are having the hardest time kind of getting adjusted because, having to keep up with schoolwork, for example, and having those pressures added. One of the things that you're doing when you include the details in the meeting invitation is you're allowing them to kind of prepare and be mentally ready as they come to the meeting and ready to contribute. So, probably oddly, more than any time before, time is absolutely at a premium right now. If not time, then definitely attention span. And I think, I'll go on record by saying, hey, even when we're all in the office together and we're co-located, we absolutely should still be doing this, but it's even more important now because as we're kind of having to switch channels from live and in person with the family to being online with my colleagues to focusing on actually getting work done, when I have these contextual details, I'm able to say, okay, this is going to help me switch gears more quickly. And I think, again, back to the eye toward productivity is going to help us maintain that productivity in the long run.
That's right. And this goes very nicely into agendas, but personally, I look at my calendar before I go to bed every night to see what's happening the next day. And sometimes I'll, of course, double check it when I get up and get going with my morning routine. And I like to look at what's on my calendar, who all am I meeting with, and then dive a layer deeper to see what's on the agenda. So I don't know about you all, and Laurie, I'm sure you see this a lot. I get a lot of meeting requests that just have the subject line in the invitation. There's no meat inside of it. A good example is just the other day, I was invited to a kickoff call. And there was no specificity as to who was going to be there, what constituted the kickoff call, what the expectation of me would be for that call. It was very vague. And so that left me hanging, and I had to be ready for some improv during that call to make sure I could satisfy the client that actually joined the call. I didn't know the client was going to be there. So having an agenda that's very clear that shows what are we going to talk about, and keeping it reasonable to what you can actually achieve in the time allotted is a big, big deal. A good agenda is going to explain why we're meeting, what we're here to discuss, and then it's going to conclude with a portion of the agenda to talk about action items and next steps. It's very, very important to share that level of detail. Again, as Laurie was saying, when you're switching gears, going between making sure the kids have lunch and then putting your work hat back on and coming back to work, you need to know what's expected of your increasingly more valuable time.
Yeah. So we did have a question pop up in the Q&A. What are our thoughts on establishing core hours of availability while allowing employees to flex their schedule around the kids who may be home and need support from them? I know I've got some ideas on that, but what are your thoughts there, Justin?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind for me, really two things. One is to keep your calendar current, because that's going to be what your colleagues look to first. If you use any external services like Meeting Bird or Calendly, where external people can also block time on your calendar, you want to make sure that your calendar is current. So if you've established with the kids that lunchtime is 12 to 1, block that on your work calendar so that folks can't book on top of those already important activities that you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, again, it comes back to the intention and purpose, right? If to say, okay, you know, if you look at the tasks that you need to complete during the day, sometimes you're going to have to be kind of hands down to get your work done. When can you do that? You're going to have to devote some time to being able to interface with colleagues and be able to collaborate and coordinate. When can you set that aside? And then you're going to have to fit the family's needs in there as well. You know, how do you juggle that? I think if you can set it up and maybe have a conversation with your team and say, hey, you know, we do need a little bit of time to be able to get together. I'm going to reserve this time. Can everybody reserve that time, right? And negotiate with them. Now, to that point, there was a follow-on question that showed up about stand-ups. You know, I think, you know, are they a good idea, right? The difference between micromanagement and not micromanagement. I think stand-ups can be a great idea. And in fact, I just had the conversation with my team this morning. We are working toward a deadline in the middle of all this, pretty significant deadline on a large project right now. And after talking about it, we said, you know what, maybe we do need to implement a daily stand-up. But here's the thing. I think stand-ups in and of themselves are not evil. Poorly run stand-ups are a terrible idea. So if you can, again, have the discipline to be able to run the stand-ups in the way that they are intended to be, which truly is, what did you work on yesterday? What are you working on today? And what blockers do you have? And go round robin and get it, and then move on. That actually is a great way to keep the team moving forward with a minimum amount of time investment and the ability to stay connected. What are your thoughts, Justin?
It is. We'll talk a little bit about stand-ups even more in a few minutes too. You know, as part of structuring your day, you may want to also have that conversation with other folks in your house. So
Yep.
Laurie and I both have spouses working from home right now as well. So we start the day with the conversation of, when is your best chance to break for lunch? Can you walk the dogs, or do I need to walk the dogs? We're having those conversations under our own roof, and then reflecting that on our respective calendars as well. So if there's something urgent that needs to be done, you can add it and block that time to make sure that that time is still set aside.
That's right. That's right. And the final thought I think that I would toss out there with this, I would encourage everybody to reevaluate, particularly because time is scarce right now. Reevaluate how much time you actually need to spend communicating with your teams, right? So I would much rather have a 30-minute, very tight, very well-run meeting with clear agenda, meeting purpose, goals, objectives, minutes sent afterwards. That is an intense 30 minutes than an hour-long meeting of kind of warbling along, right? So again, it becomes on us to make sure that those meetings are actually providing value. And I would encourage everybody on the webinar, if you're involved in situations at your office where you're having these meetings and they're just not all that productive, please speak up, right? And offer a better way and say, hey, can we try stand-ups? Let's get clear on meeting purpose and agenda setting and goals and objectives, and then notes and action items coming out of there, so that we're maximizing and optimizing the amount of time that we have.
Exactly. All right. Let's talk video. We're using video today. I hope that you guys on Zoom can see Laurie and I's smiling faces. Video is a big deal and it's increasingly popular. We're fans of embracing video. And to the extent of go ahead and start your day just like you would if you were going to the office. Get up, get dressed, set up your workspace, and meet face to face with your colleagues. There's something very, very special about being able to look someone in the eye or see the expression on their face where you can see people and see, are they confused? Are they happy? Are they upset? Those are those visual cues that we all benefit from when we talk to one another in person inside of the office, and video is allowing us to do that from home. Now, I'm hearing stories that some companies have a little bit of limited bandwidth and they're cutting back on video usage inside of their VPNs. You know, that's something that'll get worked through. I have no doubt there are engineers working on that right now, because everyone is seeing how important it is to meet face to face.
Yeah, I think do what you can when you can, right? The only thing that I'll add with video, look, your house doesn't have to look like an episode off of, Better Homes and Gardens. It is what it is, right? I mean, it's like I said at the top of the call, this is an opportunity for us to meet and get to know your family, your pets. It is what it is, right? Let's give ourselves some grace, remain humane, and say we're doing what we can when we can. That said, and Justin and I could probably go on for days over embarrassing situations that you hear either on the phone or, heaven forbid, you see on video. Be mindful, right, of noises, sounds, maybe unsavory views. That would be as far as I would take it there.
Yeah, I would add too that find a place to carve out inside of your home that's safe for video. Maybe it's a spare bedroom with a door and a lock to keep the pets out or keep the kids out or what have you. Someplace where you can go and get set up and even leave the lamp there, leave your desk there, your laptop, keep it set up where it's easy to jump in the seat and get to work. A really cool tip, Laurie was telling me this just the other day. She puts a Post-it note on the outside of her office door that is just a little stop sign. It's something universal that an adult or a kid can understand. And if the stop sign is up, don't come in. That means you're on the phone. So little tricks like that will go a long way to minimizing those sorts of distractions in the background.
And I think, Justin, one more point, that having a dedicated space to work, even if it's not the most video friendly, even if it's not the best lighting or whatever, but I would say even more important than those things, having a dedicated place to work right now, have it be your spot. If it's your dining room table and you're constantly having to clear off all of your equipment in order to be able to set the table for dinner, that might not be the optimal space. If you've got a card table, if you've got, just a little corner of something. I mean, my first work from home space was actually a desk in the corner of my bedroom, and I hung up a neutral colored panel in the back so that my colleagues and my clients didn't have to see my bedroom. But that worked, right? It was my little spot. I could leave things there. I could keep my water bottle there. I wasn't having to kind of go through all of the heavy startup and then shut down at the end of the day. I could just kind of close my computer, end my day, and return to life as a family member.
Exactly. I see some more Q&As popping up. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to let Laurie facilitate those because I have PowerPoint running, but if you see anything we need to stop for, we can take those questions or take them at the end.
Yeah, I think the one question as we're building up with the boundaries, right? Set clear boundaries. The question is, how do you set clear boundaries when working remotely with teams across time zones? I'm assuming that this question has to do with maybe the East Coast versus West Coast, or, in my scenario where we have the Europe versus North America. I think, again, have those conversations right now. Acknowledge the fact that we're all a little bit off balance, that we're doing things that we're not used to doing. Have those conversations, and I think say, hey, as a team, let's agree on our kind of operating protocols and say, I'm available with these hours. I have my colleague in London, for example, regularly will make himself available after his dinner hour to be able to take meetings with us. At the same time, we respect that for the fact that, we know that when he hangs up with us, he's going to bed. So we're sure to try and end meetings early. If we can't end them early, we end them on time. If he says, guys, I just need to go, that's fine. We let him go first. That's how you do it. Right? That's how you do it. And then if it drags out, if you're the person in London and the team is dragging on and you really need to go to bed, apologize, excuse yourself, and head for bed, and then follow up with that conversation later.
That's right. And what the slide that's up now bleeds into some of our suggestions around video conferencing. And I think regardless if you stick to telephone or even if you just stick to email, whatever works for you and your company, maintaining a routine is very, very important.
Excellent.
So when I work from home, I still like to get up and do my routine of take a shower, get dressed, have breakfast, and go to work. Whether the going to work means going to my office, my home office, or it means getting in the car and driving to my actual office, I like to maintain a sense of routine. And I found that is something that works really well for me and works really well for a lot of people that I know. There's an added benefit. If you go ahead and get up and get dressed and get ready for the day, you're ready no matter what happens today. So if an emergency pops up and you need to take a kid to the doctor, or you have a senior parent who's self-quarantining and they need something, you're already dressed and ready to hop in the car and go. Versus if you roll out of bed and you're still in your pajamas sitting in front of the computer, you're not really ready. You might be able to process some emails, but you're not ready to jump on a video conference or jump in the car and handle the day.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Agree.
So now we'll talk a little bit about soft skills. So there's a heightened awareness to certain soft skills while we're all working remotely. And we wanted to talk about some of these areas that can help your team be more productive, balance, and respect among teammates. And this is a big one. Laurie and I both facilitate a lot of workshops, and we've done so for organizations as small as a 2-person startup all the way to the federal government, Department of State, Veterans Affairs, and so on. And consistently, in each of our workshops, we post ground rules for good behavior. And sometimes they get a chuckle, but really we can always refer back to those ground rules. And we often have meeting attendees refer back to them. And a chief one when working virtually and using technologies like we're using this afternoon is to speak one at a time. Allow participants to finish their sentences and their thoughts during conferences, be it a phone conference or a video conference. We all know a general life rule is it's rude to interrupt someone, but sometimes we get passionate about a topic and we just have this idea and we just have to get it out there. Well, on a video conference, you need to slow it down a little bit. Sometimes there's a little bit of lag time in the line or lag time on the video, and give some grace for that person to finish their thought.
Exactly. And I think we probably are a little bit beyond this right now, but had this yesterday actually with a colleague who had just finished setting up his home office. And what we discovered was that there was this very strange audio situation going on, right? If somebody is having some audio difficulties, right, it's a good idea to figure out a way to call that to their attention and help them troubleshoot it. Now, at the same time, you don't want to derail the meeting, right? So, I say, hey, your audio sounds a little strange. Maybe message them or talk to them after the fact. I'm here to help serve. Let's hop on the phone and let's see if we can troubleshoot it, right? Stuff like that. Because again, anything that you're doing that may impede communication is going to have ripple effects as it goes along. And again, we might not worry about it on those days that Justin talked about earlier, where, I have to meet the plumber, not a big deal. But now that this is a permanent thing, let's make sure that we have not only all of the technology there and our good behavior, right? Proper meeting behavior. All of that together is successful. There is one question here that I do want to touch on. One of the questions came in and says, if you've got team members who are just really uncomfortable with video, like software developers perhaps, do you force them to join via video? This person's trying to figure out the balance between encouraging and pushing to a level of discomfort. And I think, this builds off of what you were saying, Justin. The opportunity to provide video and to be able to see, I can see Justin on the screen. It looks like he's done talking. Now I can go ahead and contribute, right? What you'll find is it'll enhance the overall communication experience for everybody involved. That said, maybe you start small. Maybe it's just your local team. My team, when we first started using video, everybody said, "Oh, but I look terrible." I said, "I don't care what you look like. I want to see your face. I want to feel connected to you." So maybe it's brief periods of time in certain circumstances to encourage them to get online. And then I think what happens is there's a tipping point when everybody's on video except them. Well, maybe they want to go ahead and get online, right? And particularly if you're used to working with these people during the day, I think maybe it's a little bit, there's maybe a little bit more momentum to hop on video. Whereas if they're used to working remote, you may have to reel them in a bit more. It might take a little bit longer.
That's right. That's right. And one thing to mention too, and this goes back to the soft skill on the screen and really any of these technologies that we advocate, run a test, use a friend, use your spouse, what have you, run a test, do this maybe in the evening after dinner or in the morning before the day starts. And I'll give an example. My spouse has a car that we recently bought, and something about the conference call, the Bluetooth rather, forgive the choice of words there, but the Bluetooth inside of it causes a fraction of a second delay in the words coming across to anyone else's phone. And we didn't know that until we had a couple of conversations after buying the car. But if we hadn't had those tests ahead of time, we wouldn't know that we were at risk of talking over or being talked over when we're driving and doing a work conference call. And so many of us do that now. I think I take calls practically everywhere now, and including the car. So, set up a virtual meeting, set up a Zoom meeting or what have you with your spouse in the evening, or your friend, a best friend or a parent, and see how does it sound? Do I sound okay? Do I look okay? Let me move these lights around. Let me move my lamp around and try and improve the situation.
Yeah, and a yes and to that, Justin. I know my phone, for some reason, is one of those that has that bit of a delay in order to get going. And so because I know that now, I won't jump in with what I'm saying because the first part of it gets chopped off. I'll say, "I'd like to add," or "yes and," or something like that to kind of get the phone. I don't know why it's a delay, but basically get it connected and kind of get inserted into the conversation so that I can deliver my thought that I have to do. So I think that there are ways that you can do this diplomatically in ways that aren't disruptive, that allow you to continue and contribute to the flow of conversation as naturally as possible.
Absolutely. And as a time check, we're about halfway through our webinar, and coincidentally, we're about halfway through our content. We talked through planning and logistics and some soft skills. We have a couple of more soft skills, and then we'll get into some of the more tactical skills that we recommend when working remotely and keeping your teams productive.
Perfect.
A soft skill that we shouldn't have to say this, but again, this is a ground rule that Laurie and I both put on the board when we facilitate workshops in person with large teams, and that is be kind. Be sensitive to the anxiety and the stress that so many people are feeling right now. Being sensitive and being cognizant of how you come across to others is at a heightened state right now. So, the individual who mentioned they may have a teammate who is reluctant to use video. Well, if I'm saying something and I can't read your face, I can only assume how you feel based on what you tell me, if it's just a telephone call. If we're doing video, I can see you cringe or I can see you smile. And, just the point is be cognizant of being kind right now, especially during these times where you are working virtually and the rest of your team or your clients are working virtual as well.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier about how the parents are struggling with their newfound homebound status. But I think one of the things that is a personal surprise to me is the impact on single people, right? They're used to being out, being social, being at the office, whatever. This idea of being home alone for long periods of time it has its own set of impacts, right? So I think, again, if you're a parent with young children, be cognizant of the fact that you may have a single person on the other end of the line who is totally different experience and totally different reality than you're in, but equally stressed. One of the things that I've seen popping up, and I think that this is fantastic, are the concept of virtual happy hours. This is something that we've actually done for quite some time. Over the years, I've said, hey, let's have a virtual lunch. Let's have a virtual coffee break. I've used it actually as a way to go out and do user research. How about why don't we join for a cup of coffee? I've got some questions for you. I send them a Starbucks gift card, right? Because if we were in person, I would be buying the coffee and sitting down with them and talking. And so I think that there is a corollary that we can be using here to say, you know what, I mean, the equivalent of that water cooler chat or chatting over preparing the coffee, or, unfortunately with the changes in the sports schedule, like that takes a whole big chunk of stuff. But, we've had conversations with colleagues lately about just the ridiculousness of everything going on right now. And that's given us something to bond over. Don't forget those little moments of downtime and person-to-person connection. Don't make it all just work all the time.
That's right. I'm beginning just about every meeting, including with external clients, asking the question that the majority of us like to be asked. How are you? Are you okay? Do you need anything? And just those three simple questions go a long way towards building trust and infusing a sense of kindness into the conversation.
Yeah, perfect.
So encouraging innovation, a lot of us are getting very scrappy right now. Things are different when you have to work virtually. And this is the time to promote the sharing of ideas for better ways of collaborating, serving, and operating. There are clients that Laurie and I have worked with in the past who even have innovation pipelines and established procedures for employees within the company to submit ideas for better ways of working. Now, that's on an enterprise scale for a larger corporation, but even within your smaller, more operational team of 5, 10, 15 people, you want to make sure that you're encouraging everyone to submit ideas because, things, you may try something and it's not quite comfortable for everyone, or it could be more efficient, a little bit better. Basically, just embrace those ideas and consider even setting up a reward mechanism on the back end of this thing where you recognize folks who contributed innovative ideas, new ways of working that you all adopted to serve each other and your clients.
Yeah, I think, even embracing new technologies, right, in an effort to get work done. We do have that scenario at RGP that you talked about, the opportunity to submit ideas about new technologies. But even, think global, act local. Even going out and setting up a Trello instance for your team so you can kind of track a Kanban board in terms of what everybody's working on and what's in progress. And, think differently. That's the biggest thing. I think I encourage you to think differently. There probably is a technology out there. If you're saying, oh, if only there was a way to do whatever, there probably is a technology for that. And, if you don't know what it is, connect out on LinkedIn. Ask somebody, hey, where, has anybody seen a technology for X? I would almost guarantee that somebody will come to your defense with an idea or capabilities.
That's right. And speaking of technologies, we're going to move into the part of our agenda related to tactics. So these are some tips and tricks that we want to share that we're aware of. You may have some ideas as well. Feel free to share those in the chat of this webinar. From a tool availability perspective, there are free trials available for tools that may make your day more productive. You see the logos on the screen right now of several that Laurie and I both use and have found to be just terrific. And what's nice is many of these companies are offering free long-term subscriptions right now to help promote productivity among teams. A great example is Microsoft Teams. It was just in the news. I believe they're offering either several weeks or several months. Laurie, you may know better than I.
It may be 6 months, but don't quote me on that. Yeah.
Exactly. The majority of systems out there offer at least a 30-day free trial. And we encourage you to check those out. Any tools that promote video collaboration, chat, screen sharing, anything that promotes automation of workflows, go check out those tools. Now, obviously, if you work for a larger corporation, your IT department is going to have a lot to say about that. So if you had this hunch, you just had this feeling that something could be done better if we apply a tool to it, reach out to your IT partners and ask them, what all do we have licenses to? And ask the question, if I find something that I think will really benefit my team as we collaborate remotely, can I bring it to you and get authorization to install it on the company laptop or company desktop?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, our organization right now is going through an effort to consolidate around platforms and technologies. And so that last point is particularly important if you're working at the enterprise. Get your IT team's blessing to make sure that, you're not out just randomly signing up for new technology when they've already got stuff in place that is intended to be able to support the enterprise, because a lot of times those enterprise tools, for example, our Teams instance is hooked in with our SharePoint capabilities so that document storage and collaboration is covered. If you do that outside of our corporate instance, you're kind of on your own. So there's a lot of value in making sure that you're there, but at the same time, keep moving forward.
That's right. And also in the thread of technology, the use of a shared drive. This is a big deal for me. So using a cloud-based shared drive and also emailing each other links to files instead of actual file attachments. Most of us, when we onboard with a company, we get that in our onboarding. We have SharePoint, use SharePoint for all of your file storage, and we hear it, and then it goes in one ear and out the other, and we start saving files to our desktop or to our C drive or what have you. The main thing is right now with the majority of folks working remotely, you don't have an IT department that you can run down the hallway to when your laptop is on the fritz, right? If your laptop is on the fritz, it could be days or weeks before someone can repair it, or days or weeks before you get a replacement. The company may give you grace to use your personal laptop, but you won't have all your files on it unless they're in the cloud. So there are a number of reasons why using the cloud is a very good thing anyway, but especially now with everyone working remotely. Just try to mitigate the risk. Just try to take it out of the picture altogether of what would happen if your computer stops working today. Laurie, if you want to add to that, yeah.
I lived that last week, actually. My computer died last Thursday, and I'm back up and running. Was able to pick up a new computer, ironically, that had been waiting for me. But because everything was backed up, there was very minimal disruption. And so, yes, I mean, yes, 100 times yes, can't underscore that enough. Back up your stuff. So use the cloud, back up the stuff. It may seem like extra steps on a daily basis, but when you lose something and now you've got to run around and everything grinds to a halt, you'll thank yourself.
And I know we had some folks sign up for today's webinar that they are either small business owners or work for small businesses. And I think it's very important to know there are systems out there geared just for you, and that scale as your business scales. So Google Drive has a free tier and a paid tier that is very low cost per month. Dropbox, same sort of thing. You can start putting all of your very important files into those cloud solutions. Those cloud solutions are secure and they're accessible from practically anywhere. So even if you don't work for a major corporation that has SharePoint or something more enterprise in place, know that there are solutions out there for you as a small business operator that will protect you no matter what. If you rely on a server in the back room of your office, or you rely on everyone's laptops, If something happens to your office building or something happens to that equipment, if you're using the cloud, then you can remain operational immediately. If you have to back up some computers or restore from hard drives, that's going to be a multi-hour, multi-day, potentially multi-week activity.
Exactly.
So increasing visualization. So Laurie and I are also, we have backgrounds in user experience and design, and we know the power of a picture. The old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words really is true. And when you're working remotely, it's really important to keep that in mind and to convey concepts to one another, ideas to one another. In the office, you can huddle together and get a marker out and start drawing on a whiteboard. And once everyone sees what you're drawing on the whiteboard, they start nodding and agreeing or saying, no, correct that. That shouldn't be a decision. That should be something else, right? If you're modeling a process, that advantage you have when you're in person goes away when we're all working remotely. But there are tools out there and techniques and tactics that you can apply to keep that going. And that would include hand drawings. Maybe you just take a notebook, draw a sketch on it, snap a picture with your cell phone and text it to your colleagues and say, is this what you're talking about? Maybe you get a little bit more fancy and use something like an online whiteboard to draw sketches with one another and start modeling processes live with one another on the screen share. And then Laurie mentioned this earlier, taking a lesson out of agile delivery and using a Kanban board in a tool like Trello to show the progression of work and the progression of activities from idea all the way to execution and into production. You can track things on a Kanban board as they migrate through their maturity to completion.
Exactly. And I think, ironically, even Justin and I preparing for this call, we're taking pictures and, holding it up and saying, this is what I'm seeing here. Is that right? Right. The more visual you can get, the better it is. Get creative with it. I have, you'll see behind me here, stick-on whiteboards are one of my favorite things ever. I have 3 of them here in my office. I've sourced those through a company called Writey Board, WRITEY board.com. In my old house, I actually had one that was like 5 by 7 on my hallway wall, just because so much of what I do is so visual. So again, chart pad from Home Depot could be great. If you miss your office whiteboard, right, figure out a way to mock that up at home. There's lots of ways to be able to do it.
That's right. And I think the main thing is, even if, let's say you're in a role with your company that is not design in nature or not visual in nature, a picture is still worth 1,000 words. Let's say you work in an accounting or finance role and you have a very complex calculation or algorithm. It's going to make a lot more sense to someone once they see it versus just talking about it. So don't underestimate your ability to convey a concept, even if it's just pen and paper and snapping a quick picture of it. Don't minimize the impact that an image can have on the conversation.
Agreed.
All right, so Laurie, we are at our final tip and trick, and this is one we've alluded to. Let's talk through this and then we'll finish up the Q&A from the folks who joined us today. But this is the concept of a daily stand-up meeting. Now, those of you who have not worked in agile or software development, this concept may be foreign to you until we explain it. Then you're going to have that moment of, oh yeah, well that makes sense. So right. This is a daily check-in to hear what everyone worked on yesterday, what they're doing today, and any blockers that they have that could affect their progress. So in a software world, it's pretty easy to quantify this stuff that we just talked through. So if I'm a software developer, yesterday, I'll say, yesterday, I completed these tasks, I coded these functions. Today, I'm going to code these functions. And at the moment, the only blocker is that I'm awaiting detailed requirements from the business analyst in order to finish my code. All right, let's take that same thing into more of a business focused role, right? So I'm on the finance team. Yesterday, I reconciled these balance sheets. Today, I'm going to reconcile these balance sheets. And the only thing that's affecting my progress is that the sales team has not given me their detailed numbers, right? So this is a pattern that we recommend, especially for teams, especially in that scenario where you've gone from just the one-off person working remotely to having a full team work remotely. Every morning or at some point during the day, have a brief stand-up call where each person goes around the table, so to speak, the virtual table, and gives their update in this format. You do not want this to turn into a long drawn out sort of session. You want folks to keep it brief. If there is someone who has a whole lot to say and it may start to bore the other attendees, you may want to refer them to have an offline meeting or to sync up with folks after the daily stand-up. So there's a bit of facilitation. You'll want to identify who is the owner of this meeting every day, who's going to facilitate the conversation and keep an eye out for those sort of behaviors, and also someone perhaps to record what was said during the meeting, whether you click the record in the Zoom meeting or you capture it in writing, just so that you can monitor progress day after day.
Yeah, I think to underscore, right? It's so simple to organize. It's so simple to look at on paper. I don't want you to underestimate the challenge sometimes that it is to keep that group moving and keep things going. And so, you might have to try it a little bit. Justin, your point about having a meeting owner and a person who's going to keep it on track, right? It truly is. We are going to limit it only to this. We're not going to solve any problems right now, right? If we have to solve problems, we're going to use that to set up additional conversations to break out and solve problems. So, truly stay focused only on those three things, and then do breakouts after the fact to be able to solve those problems, but let the other people go so they can get back to their work. I think one of the questions that popped up earlier was, is that micromanaging? I would be inclined to say, because I've been involved in really well-run stand-ups, I would say when they're well-run, no. If it's not well-run and people are there forever, that becomes drudgery, that becomes painful, right? Now all of a sudden we're preventing people from doing their work instead of allowing them or supporting them to get their work done. And so that for me is kind of the tipping point. But I know that there are a ton of resources out online available in terms of how to run effective stand-ups. I would encourage you, if you don't have experience in this, take a look, reach out to Justin or to me, we can help. But it definitely is worth a try, because then you can kind of get everybody together briefly, understand what's going on, and then let everybody go back to their respective corners and get on with their day.
And I would add too that making this a daily ritual is incredibly important. So speaking to those of you who are watching today who are managers or directors, you all know on your teams, and this is, no surprise to anyone, there are folks who are high performers, and there are folks on your teams who may not be performing at the same level as everyone else. By having this check-in on a daily basis, now keeping in mind, everyone's working from home in this scenario. So you're not able to pop by their desk and ask how things are going, right? So as a manager and being strategic about your work, you need this daily check-in to make sure that progress is still being made on the activities your team is responsible for. If you do this sort of meeting on a daily basis, you'll start to see some trends emerge. You're going to see who are the folks on this daily stand-up who have not made quite as much progress. Who are the folks on the daily stand-up who have maybe too much on their plate and need to share some of the work with others on the team. Those things will come to light as long as everyone is checking in on a daily basis. Now, that point about micromanaging, I would say there's this, I think Laurie's point is spot on. If it's a well-run meeting, it's not going to feel that way at all. I think that the majority of reasonable people will understand the importance of a daily check-in, especially when everyone is working from home. An average update from any one person on the team during a daily stand-up should take no more than 2 to 3 minutes worst case. 3 minutes would be on the worst case end of the spectrum. Anything longer than that, and they're sharing way too much information, and that should be handled offline.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, good. Should we open the floor for additional Q&A? I know that there are some things, we actually had a lot of questions come in we tried to address as many on the fly as we can, but shall we open it to the floor?
Absolutely. And I see a few here. I can read through I'll read through what we have, and then everyone please continue adding to the list. What's your view on having a daily stand-up versus an every few day meeting with your team while remote? Again, I'm an advocate for doing it every day. This should not take too much of your day. Schedule it as a 15-minute meeting. That in and of itself is going to tell the attendees that we need to keep it quick. We need to make this short and sweet, keep your updates concise, and let's move on with our days. I saw the question about core hours. Laurie spoke to that earlier. Refocusing after stepping away. I think we talked about that a good bit. As long as your day is a little bit more structured right now than it may typically have been, you'll be able to refocus because you know what's happening next. You know what your 2 o'clock is about. You know what your 3 o'clock meeting is about.
Yeah, and I think the next comment that was added here, right? A reminder, build breaks for yourself. That is absolutely critical. Wholeheartedly agree. Even again, if you begin to schedule in 15-minute increments right now, that's fine, right? You can do a 15-minute stand up, and then you can go stand on your deck for 15 minutes or walk to the mailbox or do little things like that. And I think, that's the other part of it. Get outside for a few minutes. I think that was one of the hardest things for me starting to work remotely is I would kind of lock myself in my workspace and not go outside. Now, if your head's down working and you can stay focused and productive, go work on your deck for a little while, or go work on your front porch or whatever. But yes, wholeheartedly, yes, take breaks. I've taken meetings before for my exercise bike, on meetings where I've been listen only, right? Don't forget to move. That is one of the things that I think we all noticed when we started working remotely. The refrigerator is just there and it's full of food, ideally. And, it's very easy to just kind of snack out of control. So, and we're not walking from the house to the car, to the office, to lunch, to back again. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Bake in some exercise and be cognizant of your snacking as well.
And I find when I work from home, it's easy to get so booked with meetings back to back that it's difficult to step away and take a break or take a breather. You may consider scheduling meetings that are 50 minutes in duration or 45 minutes in duration to give yourself a chance to take a bio break or grab a snack or walk to the mailbox just to get your legs moving. It's just like being on a long flight. You've got to get up and walk around after a while, and bake those things into your schedule right from the start. And I really think everyone who participates in your meetings will appreciate it. I wanted to share too, I see in the chat, there was a question about a whiteboard tool, things you can use online. And someone mentioned a tool called Mural is a great tool for online whiteboarding sessions. That's one I'm not familiar with. I've taken a note of it. I'm going to take a look at that later. But like so many tools, go out and try it. Download a free copy or sign up for a free subscription or a minimal subscription. Give it a try, and you may be able to sell your teammates on using it as well.
Exactly.
All right. I don't see any additional Q&A at this time. I want to pause just for a second to make sure everyone has a chance to ask any questions that are on their mind. In the chat, it looks like, let's see. All right, I think any additional questions before we All right. Laurie, any parting words?
No, I think we've covered the majority of it. I'm looking at the attendee list. The one thing that I will add, I think anything that we've talked about today is also viable for students, particularly older students, high school age, college age. realizing how this is impacting them as well. So most of what we've talked about here in terms of good meeting etiquette, preparing well, being focused on what we're doing, being visual, that will apply to them as well. So I would encourage you, if you have an older student in your life who may be struggling a little bit with this, share these tips with them as well, because it may be beneficial.
That's right. And, you know, I take for granted personally that I work with so many technologists. We're pretty accustomed to a lot of the tools and techniques that we talked about today. You know, hopping on a screen share is no big deal. We've been doing that for years. However, not all of my clients are that accustomed to it. So I've been offering each of my external clients, because I don't know how comfortable they are with these tools and techniques, a preliminary session of you know, 5 to 10 minute call to get things set up, make sure the technology is working before we have our deep dive meeting into whatever we're talking about. And I'm working for a nonprofit organization right now who is a client of mine, and their sponsors are of a generation where many of them are now retired. They're volunteering their time. So they missed out on this wave of working virtually and having shared screens and whatnot. So we are spending a little extra time with them to make sure they know how to install the tools, get it up and running, make sure it's working well for them. And the reaction so far has been fabulous. They're like, oh, this is great. I'm stuck at home. Now I feel like I'm having a better conversation. I was very anxious about meeting in person. Now this is fantastic. So, you know your audience, know who you're meeting with, and meet them halfway.
That might be one of those new ways of working that we talked about at the beginning, right? You might have just opened up a whole new realm of opportunities for that particular demographic.
That's exactly right. All right. Well, I suppose we can call it a session. Thank you all
Yeah.
so much for attending today. We really appreciate you and your willingness to learn and hear our ideas today. I hope you found it valuable. Let me put on the screen here, this is our contact information. If anything comes to mind after this call, don't hesitate to email both Laurie and I, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible. And we look forward to talking with you all again in the future.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Good luck, and let us know if you've got any questions.
All right. Thank you all. Stay safe out there.